one of the most mysterious crimes in criminal history, a case with many twists and turns, still shocks people to this day. On September 15, 1981, the small village of Esching am Ammersee in Germany woke up to a day that seemed like any other. Ursula Herrmann, a 10-year-old girl, started her day with breakfast with her family. The soft autumn light streamed through the window, promising a beautiful day. Ursula got ready for school, wearing her favorite green trousers, a cozy gray cardigan, and her reddish-brown sandals. She grabbed her backpack and her red bicycle, the faithful companion of many adventures. At school, Ursula was a diligent student. Her teachers described her as an intelligent and curious child, always eager to learn. That morning, she had regular classes, laughed with friends, and participated in activities as usual. The normalcy of school was a stark contrast to what was about to happen. After school, Ursula went to her cousin's house in Skondorf. The two girls got along very well, and the afternoon passed quickly, filled with laughter and conversation. They played board games, had snacks together, and for a brief moment, the world seemed a safe and fun place. Around 7:20 p.m., Ursula's mother called her aunt's house, asking her to come home. It was a short trip, just a 10-minute bike ride along the familiar forest trail. Ursula, always obedient, said goodbye to her cousin, took her bicycle, and left. The sun began to set as she rode along the leaf-covered trail. Half an hour passed, and Ursula had not yet arrived. The clock marked time with a twinge of unease. Her mother called her aunt's house again, and the response was immediate and alarming. Ursula had left 25 minutes earlier. Panic began to set in. Ursula's father ran into the forest from Esching, while her uncle did the same from Skondorf. In the middle of the way, their cries echoed among the trees, calling for Ursula. But all the forest returned was a cold and oppressive silence. As night fell, neighbors, police officers, and firefighters joined the search, their flashlights trying in vain to penetrate the growing darkness and dense vegetation. With midnight approaching and the rain starting to fall, a sniffer dog led its handler away from the lake, towards the thick underbrush. There, 20 meters from the trail, they found Ursula's little red bicycle abandoned. The bicycle was there, but Ursula was not. The discovery of the bicycle intensified the search. The perimeter was expanded. At dawn, hope mingled with despair. The police issued a plea to the public, asking for any information that could help locate Ursula. The community of Esching am Ammersee was united in pain and hope, but the answers were few, and time seemed to be everyone's worst enemy. The silence was finally broken in a disturbing way. On Thursday morning, when Ursula had been missing for over 36 hours, the phone rang at the Herrmann's house. It was an anonymous call. When Ursula's parents answered, there was silence, and then a short and familiar jingle, which they recognized as the traffic bulletin from Bayern 3 radio station. More silence followed, and then the jingle played again before the caller hung up. 3 more similar calls, disconcerting and sinister, followed over a period of hours. A team from the local police department, now stationed inside the Herrmann's house, began recording the calls. At noon the next day, the mailman delivered an envelope addressed to Ursula's father, marked as urgent. Inside was a ransom note made up of letters and words cut out from tabloids. "We have kidnapped your daughter," the note began in poor German. "If you want to see your daughter alive again, pay a ransom of 2 million German marks. That's about $572,000 US. The kidnappers, thinking the letter had arrived a day earlier, before the calls began, explained that they would call the Herrmanns using a jingle as a signal. "Just say whether you will pay or not. If you call the police or don't pay, we will kill your daughter." The Herrmann's home, once a place of laughter and comfort, was now enveloped in painful silence. When the phone rang that afternoon and the jingle sounded, Ursula's mother agreed to pay the ransom. She also asked for proof of life. What were her daughter's nicknames for her 2 stuffed animals? When the kidnappers did not respond, she became desperate. "Talk to me. Say something, anything about Ursula." That same night, the kidnappers posted a second letter, which arrived on Monday, September 21st, with curiously specific instructions about the ransom. The kidnappers wanted the money to be paid in used 100 German mark notes, packed in a suitcase. It would be delivered to an as-yet unidentified location by Ursula's father, who would drive alone in a yellow Fiat 600 at a maximum speed of 90 kilometers per hour. The Herrmanns were not wealthy. A neighbor raised part of the ransom, and the state agreed to cover the rest. The Herrmanns waited desperately for more instructions. But there were no more letters or phone calls. The police also had no strong leads. 2 weeks passed. The police decided to search the forest again. Teams began to comb through using metal rods to probe the ground. October 4th, 1981, began with a cold mist enveloping the forest. Ursula had been missing for 19 days. That morning would mark the Herrmann family forever. At 9:30 a.m., there was a loud cry. In a small clearing about 800 meters from the lake path, one of the officers hit something solid while probing the ground. Another officer ran over and, with trembling hands, after clearing the leaves and scraping off a layer of clay, discovered a brown blanket covering a wooden board. He removed it and found a second board, which appeared to be the lid of a box. It measured 72 centimeters by 60 centimeters, the size of a small coffee table, painted green and locked on top with 7 sliding bolts. Using a shovel, he forced the lid open and peered inside. The sight was devastating. There lay Ursula, lifeless. The officer cried as he pulled her out. 2 detectives were sent to break the news to Ursula's parents, just a few steps away. Although her mother was too distraught to ask any questions, her father repeatedly asked, "Had his daughter been hurt before she died?" The truthful answer was no. An autopsy concluded that Ursula died between 30 minutes to 5 hours after being buried. As there was no sign of struggle, not even movement, inside the box, doctors assumed she had already been drugged beforehand, possibly with nitrous oxide. A box designed to create the illusion of comfort in a nightmarish scenario. It seemed the kidnappers planned to keep Ursula alive. The box, 1.40 meters deep, was equipped with a shelf and a seat that functioned as a toilet. It was stocked with 3 bottles of water, 12 cans of soda, 6 large chocolate bars, 4 packs of cookies, and 2 packs of gum. It also contained a small and bizarre library of 21 books, ranging from comics to westerns, romances, and thrillers. There was a light and a portable radio tuned to Bayern 3, the same station that broadcast the traffic jingle. To allow Ursula to breathe, the box had a ventilation system made of plastic pipes that extended to ground level. But whoever designed it failed to realize that, without a machine to circulate the air, the oxygen would quickly run out. The police believed they were hunting more than one kidnapper, due to the size and weight of the box. Weighing 60 kilograms, it would likely require at least 2 people to carry it into the forest. The perpetrators must have known the forest well, as they chose a remote location within it and avoided drawing attention while digging the hole and clearing paths through the dense underbrush. The entire community felt the weight of this discovery. There was a mix of anger and sadness, a desire for justice for little Ursula. The shock was amplified by the frenetic press coverage. Desperate to find the culprits, the police offered a reward for information, and tips poured in. A name emerged: Werner Mazurek, a 31-year-old local radio and television technician who lived just a few kilometers from where Ursula's body was found. A combination of factors raised suspicions about him. There were rumors that he was in financial trouble, so he had a motive. When questioned by the police, Mazurek took 24 hours to provide an alibi. He was with his wife and 2 friends playing the board game Risk. Mazurek's house was searched by the police, but it revealed nothing that linked him to the crime. The forensic team that examined the box found a fingerprint on a piece of adhesive tape, renewing hopes of solving the case. But there was no match with the prints of the thousands of local residents examined, including Mazurek. The police suspected that Mazurek was involved. At the end of January 1982, they arrested him and interrogated him for several days before releasing him. Meanwhile, Klaus Pfaffinger, an acquaintance of Mazurek, came onto the police radar. Pfaffinger had financial problems and a questionable reputation. In an initial interrogation, Pfaffinger made a shocking confession: that Mazurek had asked him to dig a hole in the forest in early September 1981, promising money. Convinced they had solved the case, the detectives took Pfaffinger to the forest that separated Esching from Skondorf to show them the location of the box. He could not locate it and retracted his confession. After 10 subsequent interrogations over the following months, he refused to repeat his confession and was eventually released without charge. Mazurek, for his part, vehemently denied any involvement in Ursula's kidnapping and death. In the summer of 1982, Mazurek was preparing to move away from Esching with his family. The lead detective who had been pursuing him was replaced. The new police team found more evidence of the kidnappers' methods, including a wire they had tied to trees along the lakeside path to serve as an alert system during the kidnapping. By the end of the 1980s, the investigation had been closed. Throughout Germany, most people still remembered the shocking unsolved case of the 10-year-old girl buried alive in a box. Meanwhile, Ursula's parents and siblings did their best to move on with their lives. The media, always attentive to unsolved cases, kept interest in Ursula's kidnapping alive. Documentaries and investigative programs periodically revisited the case, interviewing forensic experts, former police officers, and community members. In the mid-2000s, the State Service for Criminal Investigations began to review its backlog of archived cases. The kidnapping of Ursula Herrmann was still a stain on the reputation of the local police and judiciary. Prosecutors hoped that the development of DNA profiling could help solve the case. In 2007, a genetic sample recovered from a screw in the box matched one found on a glass at the Munich penthouse of a wealthy woman who was brutally murdered there in May 2006. But the hope was short-lived. The suspect on trial for the murder was a child at the time of Ursula's kidnapping. How the match with Ursula's case sample occurred remains a mystery. Was there an error in the genetic profile? The prosecutors in the Herrmann case faced the pressure of time, as the crime had a statute of limitations of 30 years, and in 5 years it would expire, and the culprits could not be held accountable. State prosecutors returned to the case files from the 1980s to examine the main suspects. Klaus Pfaffinger, the unemployed man who briefly claimed to have dug the hole, was dead. But Werner Mazurek was still alive and living with his wife in northern Germany. In 2007, Mazurek was placed under surveillance. In October of that year, his house was searched, and he was asked to provide a saliva sample. It did not match any of the genetic profiles found in the box. But prosecutors still had hope. Among the items taken from Mazurek's house during the search was an old reel-to-reel tape recorder. Remember that in the calls to Ursula's parents, the kidnappers played a jingle? A sound expert had access to the original recordings and spent months conducting tests on the recorder, concluding that it had indeed been used in the kidnapping. On May 28, 2008, nearly 27 years after Ursula's death, Mazurek was arrested and taken to Augsburg, a city near Esching. Ursula's family was informed and could take part in the trial. According to the German legal system, relatives of victims of certain serious crimes can formally join the prosecution, with the right to see the evidence, request witnesses, and ask questions of the judges. Ursula's parents declined, and it was agreed that the co-author in the trial would be the eldest son, Michael, who was 40 years old. The trial began in February 2009, before a packed courtroom in Augsburg. Mazurek insisted he was innocent. The prosecution found several pieces of evidence of Mazurek's questionable behavior, including negative reports from relatives, a conviction for fraud, and a cruel incident with the family dog when in 1974, after returning from a party, he discovered that the dog named Susie had knocked over the kitchen trash can. He locked her in the freezer, leaving her to freeze to death. The key elements of the prosecutor's case were Pfaffinger's retracted confession, that he dug the hole at Mazurek's request, and the tape recorder, the most important and controversial evidence. The state's expert, whose specialty was phonetics and not audio, said it was likely that the same recorder found in Mazurek's house had been used in the ransom demands. After a lengthy process, in March 2010, Werner Mazurek was convicted of the kidnapping and murder of Ursula Herrmann and sentenced to life imprisonment, while his wife was acquitted due to lack of evidence. The conviction was based on circumstantial evidence and the controversy over Pfaffinger's confession. In the courtroom, everyone seemed happy except for one person. At the beginning of the trial, few people in the courtroom paid much attention to Michael Herrmann. The death of his sister still seemed to him an open circle. As a co-author in the trial, Michael requested full access to the case files, which contained tens of thousands of digitized pages. For Michael, there were many indications that Mazurek could have committed the crime, but there were also things that worried him about the prosecution's case. He couldn't understand why Pfaffinger's retracted confession was now being treated as plausible when it had been rejected so many years earlier. From the police files, it was clear that Pfaffinger had a serious alcohol problem, and his ex-wife called him a lazy person who would never have agreed to dig a large hole. Pfaffinger's confession wasn't even signed. It was written from memory by an investigator weeks later. And as with Mazurek, there was no DNA evidence linking Pfaffinger to the crime. Before the trial, the police exhumed Pfaffinger's body, but there was no match with the genetic profiles discovered among the evidence a few years earlier. His biggest concern was the tape recorder. With his musical background, he knew a lot about acoustics and sound engineering and couldn't understand how a tape recorder could be definitively linked to the ransom demands so many years ago, as the prosecution claimed. For Michael, even using a tape recorder for the jingle, the kidnappers would need a more portable device for calls made from public telephones, and the acoustic environments would affect the recording heard by the police. He wrote a letter to the court, calling the sound expert's report on the tape recorder incomplete or one-sided. The judges were not pleased, but by law, they were obliged to read the letter in court. Michael made a statement in court. "I am not convinced of his guilt," he said, "but I am also not convinced of his innocence." Instead of the circle being closed, it opened even wider. Michael began to suffer from tinnitus 6 months after the trial, with a disturbing whistle that bothered him at night and during the day, affecting his work as a music teacher. He suspected that the stress of the trial was the cause, which was confirmed by the court psychologist. Michael was increasingly skeptical of Mazurek's guilt. In 2013, he filed a civil lawsuit, asking for €20,000 in compensation from Mazurek for causing his tinnitus. It was a legal strategy, as Mazurek would defend the case on the basis that he had been unjustly convicted and, therefore, could not be considered responsible. The court would have to reconsider the facts of the criminal trial before reaching a conclusion. It would be an opportunity, Michael believed, to get closer to the truth. Unlike the criminal trial where the media focus was on Mazurek, now it was on Michael. He took journalists to Esching and to the forest where Ursula was kidnapped. Few understood why he was investigating the case. As the civil trial proceeded, Michael was not the only person with doubts about the original verdict. A retired physicist and sound expert, Bernd Hader, was highly skeptical of the tape recorder evidence. He obtained the recordings of the ransom calls and tried to see if it was possible to replicate them. After a year of tests, he concluded that it was not and offered his assistance to Mazurek's lawyer. Michael found another ally in London, Barbara Zipser, who read an online article about his efforts to uncover the truth. Zipser was a child in Germany when Ursula was kidnapped. At the University of London, she uses modern profiling techniques to identify authors of ancient Greek medical texts. She decided to analyze the ransom notes sent by the kidnappers with samples of Mazurek's writing. The person who wrote the ransom notes was well-educated, a native speaker pretending to be a foreigner writing in poor German. In August 2018, the civil process was concluded, and the court ordered Mazurek to pay Michael for causing the tinnitus. In an open letter to the state and the media, Michael wrote, "The fate of my sister has stayed with me for 37 years, and to this day, it is not clear who is really responsible for her death. Is the Augsburg legal system really not interested in solving the case of Ursula Herrmann, the death of my younger sister? If the court decides to close the proverbial lid, it must be well aware that the truth cannot be hidden. Michael and the evidence that may help identify the real kidnappers. Besides hunters, runners, and cyclists, the students of the elite boarding school also knew the forest well. The bell wire, a coil of insulated copper wire 140 meters long that the kidnappers used as part of an alert system. When investigators visited the private boarding school in Skondorf to talk to students about the case, 2 students came forward, saying that 7 or 8 months after the kidnapping, while chasing an owl through the forest, they found the bell wire hanging from trees near the lakeside path. The boys then did a very strange thing. They removed the wire, measured it on the school's athletic track, and then stored it in the dormitory, in a locked box until the police visit. Upon examining the wire, investigators realized it must have been used during Ursula's kidnapping. While one of the kidnappers waited for the victim, the other probably served as a lookout along the path, with a finger on a button that lit a lamp or rang a bell at the other end of the wire. Ransom notes. One of the main pieces of evidence pointing to the possible involvement of young people in the plot. An impression on the paper of one of the ransom notes revealed a tree of mathematical probabilities, the kind taught to teenagers. Michael also noted that in a comic book found in the box, one of the main characters drives a Fiat 600, a car mentioned in the ransom note and rare in Germany at the time, suggesting that the kidnappers may have read the comic book. At the end of 2018, in an effort to reopen the case, Michael presented a dossier with all his new evidence and theories to the state prosecutor's office in Augsburg. In April 2019, a spokesperson for the public prosecutor's office acknowledged that many people still had doubts about the verdict of the criminal trial, but insisted that the judges had reached the correct decision in 2010 and that it was final and absolute. In August of the same year, the public prosecutor's office announced that it would not reopen the case. Through his lawyer, Michael told the local press that he would no longer make public statements about the case or give interviews. Every September 15th, Michael, along with his two brothers and mother, traveled to the cemetery in Esching, where the little girl who left her cousin's house on her red bicycle and never returned is buried. Werner Mazurek, at 73 years old in 2024, was released in June 2023. According to the German Penal Code, a life sentence can be suspended on parole after 15 years if the offender has not committed any offenses while in prison. The 15 years of imprisonment include the period of pretrial detention. Mazurek, who is now in a wheelchair, has one goal. He wants to gather evidence that he is not the kidnapper of Ursula Herrmann and wishes to discover the real perpetrator. Here are some questions for you to leave your thoughts in the comments. Was Ursula the main target, or was she mistaken for one of the rich boarding school girls? Why wasn't the boarding school investigated more thoroughly? Was negligence an attempt to protect the reputation of wealthy and influential families? Who kidnapped Ursula? Mazurek and Pfaffinger, the boarding school students, or another individual who went unnoticed? Who do the fingerprints and DNA found in the box belong to? Thanks for watching, and for subscribing to the channel to see more true crime stories like the one on the screen right now.